the name of the game isn't losing money and accumulating
Of
tax
course.
loss harvesting. The name of the game is really smart guy told me this 15, 16. He goes, your objective is to owe as much tax liability as possible.
You mentioned that diversification is kind of the old adage is the best way to mitigate your risk. So someone who had invested a significant portion of their funds, whatever, a good amount into some of these narrative stocks, right? These story stocks, meme stocks, whatever the case is, right? And they made a lot of money. How can they exit that and then get into a more diversified portfolio without feeling the tax implications?
Sure. So, I mean, it depends on where they bought them, right? So, if you're buying them in an IRA or if your 401k happens to be one of the rare 401ks that offers what's called a brokerage window, which
Mm-hmm.
most don't, but a few do, there is no taxable, there is no 1099 for this year. If you're in a tax deferred account, then you don't have any mean to worry because you're going to pay taxes when you take the money out, right? Unless you're taking withdrawals. So depends on what kind of account. Now, if you're in an individual account or a trust account, what many people know as a regular brokerage account, there's two ways. I mean, you guys talk about the deferred sales trust, but also before you even get to that, the years prior, if you're brand new, it's tough. But what you do is you want a tax loss harvest
Mm-hmm.
each year, and that's where let's say you bought ABC company and 100, now it's at 50. You do get some credit for short term, but really you want to have held the position over 12 months. And to offset gains, like let's say you bought Tesla at 500 and now I think it's floating around 1,000, and you've got gain, a 50%, or 100% gain there. Uh, you would be offsetting taxes by doing what's called tax loss harvesting. You have to be very smart about it, because not just because something's down at a loss doesn't mean that you want to sell it.
Right.
There's certain positions that I have as that are losses that are great companies. There's just what the market's doing, what the market's saying right now. So not you don't need to sell everything that's at a loss, but it's most beneficial if you can find positions that are over you've owned for more than a year, and you can use that tax loss carried forward indefinitely. So over your investing career in your individual accounts, the first action, the lowest hanging fruit, best way to do it is to tax loss harvest, because at some point you're going to buy, whether even if you're just buying indexes, at some point the large cap growth is going to be negative and the value is going to be positive, or the small cap's going to be negative and the mid cap's going to be positive. So you got to be selective, and you have to wait at least 30 days to buy back that position, right? So tax loss harvesting is an extremely important aspect of investing, and I don't think many people really understand how to utilize it
Yeah.
properly, because it doesn't mean that anything's at a loss, you just sell it, because there's just certain things. But let's say you own a stock that was at 60. I won't name names because we can't be a compliance, and let's say it's trading at 16, and it doesn't the next year 2 years doesn't look too great. um, that's something you might want to, and you've owned it for over 12 months, that's something you might want to sell, might want to look at taking that, because you'll get that tax loss carried forward against your gains and whatever you were
Right.
buying. You had these huge, but that takes time, that takes years to compile a meaningful, and hopefully the name of the game isn't losing money and accumulating
Of
tax
course.
loss harvesting. The name of the game is really smart guy told me this 15, 16. He goes, your objective is to owe as much tax liability as possible, no matter what field you're in. Your objective is to owe as much tax as possible. Here's the difference: you want to find out ways to pay the least tax possible, because if you owe the most tax, that means you made a lot of money, right?
Right.
You want to create a huge tax liability, and that's not popular to say, but that means you've made a ton of money. That is the only, and then the second part of that, the more important part, is you want to do the most you can do to legally, obviously,
Of course.
defer or mitigate those taxes. But you want to create the biggest tax mountain you could ever think of, because that means you made an insane amount of money. And then there's strategies that you guys talk about as well as tax loss harvesting, which are extremely important to mitigate and do what you can within the realms of what's legal to pay as little tax as possible as what's in the book. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.